And good evening, everybody, on this beautiful Sunday evening. We're so grateful that each and every one of you are here this evening.
I know you tried so hard.
Tell me where you're at from around the world, because we have an amazing program for you. Actually, the ground rules are going to be, it's going to be amazing, multiple programs for you. And tonight, we're going to bring a panel together, only a partial panel, of over 200 experts in the Cold Case Foundation, as well as other folks, including Mr. John Ramsey, who has been trying to find justice for his daughter for over 30 years. And tonight, no filters, nothing held back. The Cold Case Foundation has been working with his family for almost a year now, behind the scenes. And tonight, we're going to discuss not some of the findings, but we hope to bring you, the audience, into a path of critical thinking and into a path of common sense, but more importantly, onto the path of where the evidence takes us. There's no bar, there's no holdbacks here. John has agreed. Through many meetings, we have gone at many different types of angles and questions. And tonight, we're going to expose those comments and concepts to you and show you two things in some of our opinions. And we're going to connect these dots methodically. And so I would just ask one thing from you. Please be respectful in the chat. Please know that the comment section will be turned off because there are many people in the world with differences of opinions, and that's okay. However, in this circumstance, because it's going to be a multi-viewed series, we want you to keep an open mind until the very, very end of this presentation, not just only tonight, but the end of the very last one. And hopefully at that point, you'll be able to see maybe a different perspective and perhaps where the evidence took you, but it may also jar some memories to somebody or something that has some information about JonBenét. So with that said, let me introduce the panel tonight. The executive director, first of all, from the Cold Case Foundation is Greg Cooper. Greg, good evening.
Hi, Chris. Good to be here with you, bud.
Great to have you here. The executive director is Dean Jackson. Dean, thank you for being here.
Hey, Chris. Looking forward to it.
One of the many names that, in our opinion, is an amazing human being, Dr. Larry Simon. Larry, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Very humbling. Thank you.
You're an amazing human being. And then, of course, we have Kurt Pillard, who has worked very closely with Lou Schmidt in the past. Am I correct, Lou? Or excuse me, Kurt?
Yes, Lou was a coworker and good friend, mentor for me. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great having you. And then, of course, the man who's been fighting for justice for his family, not just JonBenét, for his entire family, for over 30 years, Mr. Jon Ramsey. John, welcome to the program this evening. And I'm going to move some people around here. You're live.
I can't
How are you?
hear you.
Okay, we'll make that happen.
For some
You can
reason.
down at the bottom. Can everybody else hear me?
Yep.
Give me a thumbs up.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, we're good to go. So you see the wheel down at the bottom, John? Okay, nothing. Let me tell him to sign out. Dean, can you text him to sign out and sign back in?
Yep.
That's all right. John's. Oh, wait a minute. He's muted. I see he's muted. Hang on.
Maybe you could give him a call, Dean.
Okay.
Oh, there you go, John. You should be
Can you
open.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
You
you're
hear-
back. Okay, we're getting feedback also from somebody's microphone or computer. So let me figure out who that is, and then we need to get that fixed before we get started. All right, hang on.
You want me to tell him to sign back in? Sign out? And
Yeah. I don't know where that feedback's coming from. Okay, Larry,
Yes.
the feedback is coming from your computer.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to mute? You want me to mute my mic?
Is that okay? Okay, can you hear us? Okay, so you can hear, and just unmute when you're talking. Okay, so Dean, are you calling? Oh,
yeah.
okay, he needs to unmute his microphone at the bottom. And Greg, that's your computer. If you can mute too, it sounds like a washing machine.
No, it's not here, bud.
Okay.
Not this time.
All right. Well, we'll run without a washing machine, but John needs to. No, we're not hearing him. Dean, have him sign out, and then sign back in.
I'm not getting an answer on his phone, so.
Please leave your message.
Yeah, hold on.
That's all right. He's modern technology. That's the great thing about YouTube, though. We're live with, thousands of people already here, and we're
6, 7, 8, 4, 2, 8, 7, 7.
oh. All right, we'll get it fixed. Anyway, while we're doing that, while we're doing that, Greg, how are you doing up there? Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves? Greg, give us about a minute or two of who you are and what you're all about.
All right. My name's Greg Cooper, and I'm the executive director for the Cold Case Foundation. I have about 50 years of law enforcement experience, including patrol work. Been a police chief a couple times. I was with the FBI as a criminal profiler. Also worked as the program manager for the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, and also as an instructor for the FBI National Academy in the area of profiling and criminal investigative analysis. And I was the assistant to John Douglas, who was our unit chief. And after John retired, because of the position that I held, I took that position for about 10 months as the acting unit chief for the behavioral science unit.
Awesome.
Okay, I think it looks like.
Oh, he's back. He's here.
Okay.
Can you hear us, John?
Yes.
Okay, you can hang
Can
up
you
the
hear
phone.
me?
You're here. Welcome.
All right. Great. Gee, sorry.
Not a problem. You're okay. We got modern technology. It works that way.
It's usually me, John.
Yeah,
It's
you know, it
usually
didn't
me.
touch anything. It just it
Yeah.
just did it. Just
When my wife
you love
walks into the
computers.
room with earbuds, I go to visit Elon Musk myself. So you're good to go up in space.
Okay.
So what, Dean, you need to unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself, about who you are.
So I'm Dean Jackson, and I've been with Greg since the beginning when he started this foundation, and I've had the opportunity to work with him. My background is I was a deputy coroner back in the day, and also ended up working with Greg actually on as his chaplain, interestingly enough, when he was police chief, and
Not my personal one.
his personal chaplain. And so we've been working together on this, and looking forward to being with everybody tonight.
Awesome. And then Dr. Larry down at the bottom, Dr. Larry Simon, everybody a little insight as to who you are.
Yes, hello. I'm with the Cold Case Foundation. It's been a long time. How long? It's been a while. It's been, I think, about a decade. I think it's been a long time. Yeah, maybe even longer. But
about 14 years.
Yeah, 14 years. Yes. So I have my doctorate in clinical psychology / forensic. I've worked in the prison systems, plural, for a long time, and I worked on death row and enclosed management settings. Also wrote a couple books, and here I am today, talking with everyone here, and I really appreciate you having me. So thank you.
And we love Dr. Simon. One of the funniest stories, I'm just going to give you a Reader's Digest, is he was the group leader in a group of serial killers, 8 serial killers and Dr. Simon. And he brought them to...
And not knowing what a serial killer was.
And he brought them to feeling. He brought them to feeling. So that's another story for another program. We love it. And so, Kurt, introduce yourself just for this particular panel tonight.
Well, I'm a former coworker and friend of Lou Smith, who was prominent in this investigation. I retired from the Colorado Springs Police Department after 36 years. I was the Investigations Division Commander in charge of all homicides and child death investigations. I'm also a recognized expert for criminal investigations in the 10th Circuit. So that's kind of my background. Awesome.
It's great having you here. And we lost John for a moment, so he'll be back here in a second. So, this technology is just absolutely amazing sometimes. That said, so kind of the ground rules of what we're hoping to accomplish this evening are a couple of things. This is a case that we have approached as a foundation. What we're hoping to do here this evening is let you in to how the foundation operates and see real time how we start answering questions and how we start to see where evidence takes us. With that said, we have over 200 experts from around the world in the foundation. And so Greg and Dean, our approaches will tell you, our approach has always been what we would call the Mayo Clinic approach. We want to bring you up to speed on how we got here this evening and what that means. And so here's going to be the runway for this evening. And this is only this is probably going to be the first of maybe 5 installments with John and his family. And this here's going to be the history. We're going to talk about how we got here. We're going to talk about unknown male DNA and testing, and then who's been cleared, type of predatory behaviors, and we're going to examine the crime scene. But that's going to probably fall into the second and the third episode as a whole. We're going to talk about media relationships for the past 30 years that the Ramsey family has been under and dealing with. We're going to talk about positive and negative relationships, not only with the Ramsey family, but friends, neighbors, perceptions, family. And we're going to do all of this through a Mayo Clinic approach, i.e. this board of people that you see here is just a very small sample of what is coming to the investigative analysis of this particular case. And then at the conclusion of this series, we're going to talk about the questions and answers and all of those things. We don't want to do it prematurely because we want you, the public, to take a hard look at this for a moment and step back for an evening. And hopefully you'll join us multiple times, but step back for a moment and see through the lens of objectivity and through the lens of evidence, not perception. There's an old saying, that no person got to the top of the mountain by falling there. And the way we approach things as a whole, as an organization, has been successfully shown to be extremely not only effective, but extremely objective. And so with that in mind, we hope that you'll be able to have, I don't know what's going on with everybody jumping in and out here, but Greg just disappeared too. John is here. John, are you there? That's okay. I don't know where Greg went.
He can hear you, but he's not, his microphone's not working.
Okay, so that's on the computer setting on his side?
It should be on your setting, John.
Okay, and Dean, if you're talking to him, you need to mute so nobody else can hear you. You're live with about 4,000 people. Okay. Here comes Greg.
I'm back. I don't know. You must have kicked me off.
No, technology. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
That's
it's a bad omen tonight.
No, that's okay. It may be a good omen. Let's see. Poor John, he's trying to figure out how to get back in. But that said, where I'm going with this is we just want you to step back for a moment, shall you? And realize that the things that may be perceptually in the public arena may not necessarily be the accurate piece that needs to be seen. And so tonight's episode, we're going to talk about predatory behavior and a brief sense of victimology. And we're going to tie that into who was on and who's been under the radar for over 30 years. And this is an open dialogue about a conversation about the family, about multiple suspects that were out there. And we're hoping that you set back for a moment. And the one question we want you to ask yourself tonight, because one of the things we're going to approach this evening is we're going to approach the concept of, could a 9-year-old boy have done this crime? That will be the first question we want to tackle here tonight in relationship to predatory behavior. And that's why this is the very first episode that we're going to approach here. So tonight, let's talk about a little history. I first got a phone call in 1997 from Lou Schmidt. I was with a law enforcement agency in Southern California. My boss says to me, he's got a guy that he's trying to chase down, and somebody's computer is reflecting back here. That's you, Greg. You just muted. He's got a guy he's chasing down. Your mic may be too close to your deal, and that's why it's feeding back. That's all right. And he needed us to, my agency, to find this person, et cetera. Well, I was that guy who was assigned to that. And I accomplished that task. I sent it back to him. But back then, if we were to find the suspect, I needed to have some intimate details in relationship to interviewing potentially. So what was shared with me back in 1997 was the type of weapon that was used, or at least found, at the crime scene. And at the time, the public had no idea what that weapon was. They since know. And now we're going to talk about the intricacies of why that was so important to know from a suspectology, but a victimology position. And we're going to then take you to what we've titled the box within the house. And that's going to be where the talk track goes. So that said, let's talk, Greg, tell the audience how you got involved in this and back in the day. While John is, and now you need to unmute. Sorry.
Okay.
Yep, you're good now.
Okay. So back in 96, I guess it was about 96. At the time, I had left the FBI and went on to become a police chief. And I had been working with John Douglas on a conference that we had put together in Salt Lake City. And we were talking about, within that conference, talking about profiling generally. And it was about a 3-day criminal investigative analysis conference. And after we had completed the conference, John was in my office, and he had received a phone call from one of the attorneys, from John Ramsey's attorney, inviting him to come out to the Ramseys and spend some time with the attorneys and whoever else wanted to talk with him with respect to the details of this case. And I recall that John and I had quite a discussion. His response to the attorney, as I recall it, was, you may not want me to come out there and talk to you. You may not like my answers. Because at the time, we all have a tendency to go back to that which we are comfortable with and what our experience has been. And typically, those things that were of concern, John had mentioned as during our discussion, that there was a circle, if you will, of potential people of interest that naturally fall within an area of consideration. And which the first circle, or tier, which is what I like to refer to it as, is the family, particularly for certain characteristics of this type of crime, mostly not having to do with the behavioral aspects of this crime, but rather the crime scene, the location of it, and the environment, and some of the circumstances and situation. And our discussion centered around that. And So I took John out to the airport, dropped him off, which he was supposed to go home, but instead he had changed his flight plans to go out there to Boulder and visit with John Ramsey and his legal team and review the case. So that was my first exposure to this case from a perspective of interest. And but John Ramsey could certainly talk about the follow-up visit that he had with John. So I think we ought to probably at this point hand it over to John Ramsey, talk a little bit about his experience when John Douglas came out there to visit, he and the attorneys.
Yeah. John came, I didn't know of him at the time, but was introduced to him and without any, preface or any really background on who he was. But we spent a fair amount of time with him. Actually, he came to Atlanta. We were going back to Atlanta, which was really our home, and we were going back there for JonBenét's funeral because we had a cemetery plot there, and that's where we wanted her buried with my other daughter. And then John came to Atlanta, as I recall, later, and probably spent a couple, 3 days with us in our home, as I recall. But we just talked, and the main thing I remember about John, after we spent quite a bit of time with him, he said, "Well, if you had done this and you can act the way you do now, you're the most diabolical criminal that's ever walked the face of the earth." And I guess that was a compliment. But, so we got to know John, and over the next year or two, I guess, really, he testified, when the grand jury was called, ultimately, and several years later, he testified to the grand jury, and he said they weren't very nice to him, as I recall. So, but he, I think, became sympathetic to our plight and believed that we were being wrongly accused by the police. So we were grateful for that opinion.
John did call me afterwards, and we discussed how that meeting had gone, and it was in direct contrast to what our initial conversation was about, because the expectation was that it would be focused there within the family.
Yeah.
And John was the first, to my knowledge, the first expert to assess it as a profiler and make the determination or opinion, give the opinion that this was not a family crime that had occurred. Mm-hmm. And he was convinced that it was nobody within the family that was responsible for it.
Yeah. Well, we were grateful for that opinion, and obviously he was right. The police decided literally on day one, and we know this for a fact, that in fact they felt I had killed JonBenét. That was their decision, on probably within 24 hours before any evidence or any information came in from the forensic group and so forth, because I didn't act right. And that assessment was made by somebody who really hadn't had the experience in dealing with homicides or that kidnapping situation, which it was at the time. In my mind, my oldest daughter had been killed 4 years before JonBenét died in a car accident. I got a call at the middle of the day from my brother. Beth was in a car accident and she's gone. And of course, I was devastated beyond words, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't help her. I couldn't get her to a good doctor. It was over. No alternative. No way I could help her. JonBenét wasn't over that morning. I really thought I could get her back if I kept my wits about me. And so that's what was driving me. I'm going to get her back. I could do something. I just got to be sure I do everything I possibly can and do it right to get JonBenét back. And if if the so-called detective that was there that morning expected me to be crying in the corner or beating my head on the wall, that wasn't going to get it done. I wanted to get my daughter back, and I thought I could if I really kept my wits about me. So if that was not acting right, then I'm sorry, but that's the perspective I was coming at the JonBenét's kidnapping with.
So right now in modern technology, the Ramsey family we will tell you from the perspective of our foundation, they have been 100% open with our organization. 100%. They have not held back. They introduce us to Kurt. They introduce us to anybody or anything the foundation needed to follow the evidence and discuss, some of the ideas that we're going to be talking about tonight. And so one of the things I want to point out to the audience, I want to bring to everybody's attention once again, the reality of what is at stake here.
Is everything okay?
What's at stake here is over 30 years of information, with the 30th anniversary coming up in December. And there's a lot of galvanized opinions in the world about this gentleman right up above us here. From FBI profilers who, feel that they had, some insight into, certain things. And that's okay. They're entitled to their opinions. Okay. However, we don't take a position as an organization. We follow the evidence. Whatever that might mean for you, the audience, we hope you will trust this process as we go along here. So while John is figuring out why he can't hear at his end, I want to turn some time over to Kurt to tell us a little bit about the history of how Lou and yourself and others got involved in this situation, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, Lou was sought out as an expert investigator specifically for this case. The DA that was involved at the time wanted to have the best homicide investigator that he could get involved with the Ramsey investigation. So they sought out Lou and brought him into the case. I think that Lou, like many homicide investigators, kind of thought originally that, in the majority of these cases, the family's involved. And I think he went in thinking that maybe it was the Ramsey family. And based upon his investigation, that changed pretty dramatically. When Lou passed away from cancer, he had a populated spreadsheet with a mountain of information on it. And he asked some of his friends and former homicide investigators to dig more deeply into this and really seek out the truth, because that's not what he had experienced with either the Boulder Police Department or the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. So that's how I got involved.
Okay. And so as the universe being on schedule, the Ramseys approached, well, first Greg said, "Hey, you going to CrimeCon?" I said, "Yeah." I'm going to go again. He said, okay, well, John's going to be there. Anyway, so John and I talked at length. He was kind of, I'm not really sure where this guy's coming from, but he knows me now. I'm a knucklehead. He figured that piece out rather rapidly, kind of like Dr. Simon. But he trusted us, and he said, yeah, I mean, if you're willing to help, I'd love for you guys to start thinking through this thing. And so that's what we've been doing. So now, one of the first things we want to bring to the table tonight is something that's very important. As you heard, those of you who attended CrimeCon last year, John was on the stage talking about DNA and this idea of getting all of the DNA tested. And his motivation, even though he didn't say it, his motivation has always been about the truth. Follow the evidence to the truth. That's what he's been talking about. So one of the things I want to remind the audience is a piece of that truth. And that is this letter right here. I'm going to read this letter for everybody to just have a clean slate. This was a letter given by Mary T. Lacey, District Attorney of the 12th District in Boulder, Colorado. And it's addressed to Mr. John Ramsey. I want the public to once again really realize what the context of this letter. And here's what it says. And I'm going to read it paragraph by paragraph. And then I want you to apply the thought principle of a 9-year-old little boy. And what a letter like this would do to a family who's been trying to tell the public that a 9-year-old little boy has been suffering under the pressure of public opinion. And here's what it says. Mr. John Ramsey, as you are aware, since December 2002, the Boulder District Attorney's Office has been the agency responsible for the investigation of the homicide of your young daughter, JonBenét. I understand that the fact that we have not been able to identify the person who killed her is a great disappointment that is continuing hardship for you and for your family. However, significant new evidence has recently been discovered through the application of relatively new methods of DNA analysis. This new scientific evidence convinces us that it is appropriate, given the circumstances of this case, to state that we do not consider your immediate family, including you, your wife, Patsy, and your son, Burke, to be under any suspicion of the commission of this crime. I wish we could have done so before Mrs. Ramsey died. We became aware last summer that some private laboratories were conducting a new methodology described as touch DNA. One method of sampling for touch DNA is the scraping method. This is a process in which forensic scientists scrapes places where there are no stains or other signs of the possible presence of DNA to recover for analysis any genetic material that might nonetheless be present. We contracted with the Bodie Technology Group, a highly reputable laboratory recommended to us by several law enforcement agencies, to use the scraping method for touch DNA on the long johns that JonBenét wore and that were probably handled by the perpetrator during the course of this crime. The Bodie Technology Laboratory was able to develop a profile from DNA recovered from the two sides of the long johns. The previously identified profile from the crotch of the underwear worn by JonBenét at the time of the murder matched the DNA recovered from the long johns at Bodie. Unexplained DNA on the victim of a crime is powerful evidence. The match of male DNA on two separate items of clothing worn by the victim at the time of the murder makes it clear to us that an unknown male handled these items. Despite substantial efforts over the year to identify the source of this DNA, there is no innocent explanation for its incriminating presence at 3 sites on these 2 different items of clothing that JonBenét was wearing at the time of her murder. Solving the crime remains our goal, and it ultimately resolution will depend on more than just matching DNA. However, given the history of the publicity surrounding this case, I believe it is important and appropriate to provide you with our opinion that your family was not responsible for this crime. Let me read that again. I believe it is appropriate, it is important and appropriate to provide you with our opinion that your family was not responsible for this crime. Based on the DNA results and our serious consideration of all other evidence, we are comfortable that the profile now in CODIS is the profile of the perpetrator of this murder. To that extent, that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, I am deeply sorry. No innocent person should have to endure such an extensive trial in the court of public opinion, especially when public officials have not had sufficient evidence to initiate a trial in a court of law. I have the greatest respect for you, for the way you and your family have handled this adversity. I am aware that there will be those who will choose to continue to differ with our conclusion. But DNA is very often the most reliable forensic evidence we can hope to find, and we rely on it often to bring to justice those who have committed crimes. I am very comfortable that our conclusion that this evidence has vindicated your family is based firmly on all the evidence, including the reliable forensics DNA evidence that has been developed as a result of advances in that scientific field during this investigation. We intend in the future to treat you as the victims of this crime with the sympathy due you because of the horrific loss you suffered. Otherwise, we will continue to refrain from publicly discussing the evidence in this case. We hope that one day, we hope that we will one day obtain a DNA match from the CODIS data bank that will lead to further evidence and to the solution of this crime. With recent legislative changes throughout the country, the number of profiles available for comparison in the CODIS data bank is growing steadily. Law enforcement agencies are receiving increased numbers of cold case hits on DNA profiles that have been in the system for many years. We hope that one day soon we will get a match to this perpetrator. We will, of course, contact you immediately. Perhaps only then will we begin to understand the psychopathy or motivation for the brutal and senseless crime. Respectfully, Mary T. Lacey, District Attorney, 20th Judicial District, Boulder, Colorado. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the foundation for the Cold Case Foundation, where we are going to begin our investigation tonight with an open mind. And we hope you will come along with us and learn about how we're going to do this. We're going to approach this methodically. We're going to approach it with 200 experts from around the world, if necessary. Every one of them. If not, those that we can bring to the table, like Dr. Simon, like many others. We'll bring DNA experts. We'll bring handwriting analysis experts. We will bring all experts in their fields from around the country and around the United States, as well as even internationally. And we're going to do it through a methodical method of criminal behavior analysis and what we call the 10 filters. And we're going to start off in filter number 1 tonight, which we call victimology. And with that, I'm going to turn that piece of the puzzle over to Greg to explain what this and what the mythology is going to be, or the methodology is going to be, and how we're going to get there. Greg?
Thanks, Chris. So anytime we look at a case, cold or hot, so to speak, and we're trying to determine who's responsible for it, the first thing that we try to fetter out and vet out is who is the victim, because we realize that the more we understand about the victim, the more we understand also about the offender.
I've got it now on.
So we look at 2 different perspectives on the victim: victimology, the victimology continuum, as it relates to what the lifestyle is of the victim. And then secondarily, we look at that victimology continuum as it relates to what's going on in the life of that victim proximate to the time in which the crime was committed. For example, say within 48 or 24 to 48 hours to up to 72 hours, maybe the last week. It may encompass what's going on the last month or 6 months. And so what we look at based upon the lifestyle of the victim, the first area, is we look at several different perspectives. We want to know, of course, the age, the background, the experience, the domestic lifestyle, the family situation, what their hobbies may be, what their educational level is, what their social life may be. And based upon that, we make a determination as whether or not that victim is low risk, medium risk, or high risk to becoming a victim of this particular type of crime. And what we're trying to determine, is there anything within that lifestyle that may have contributed to influencing that risk level, either recklessly and negligently or innocently and naively. And what we have found is that the lower risk the lifestyle, and this is where we would look at JonBenét, very low risk. She's dependent upon her family, her parents. Most of all the associations that she has is related to family and relatives, close friends, neighborhood, etc. And any type of activities beyond that is under the direction and control of her family. So we would look at JonBenét in this situation as a very low risk type of a victim. And what we have determined over many, many years of and thousands upon thousands of cases is that the lower risk level, the lifestyle to begin with of the victim, the higher the probability that the victim and the offender may know each other, and that the victim is a known and even a targeted victim, that the offender, for one reason or another, has identified and targeted this particular victim for whatever their rationale and motivation may have been. At the other end, or the opposite end of the spectrum, is high risk. And that would be, again, going back to this lifestyle situation. The higher risk of lifestyle, let's say gang members, hitchhiking, drug addicts, prostitution, etc. Those types of lifestyles, because of individuals or people and activities that they're involved in, elevates their risk level to certain types of crimes. And what we have found there is that the higher risk the lifestyle, the higher the probability that the offender and the victim are strangers, and that the victim is a victim of opportunity, unlike our low risk, as we've mentioned. And anything in between that, as it says up there, a victim may have been loosely acquainted with the offender or selected due to a routine or accessibility patterns. So it depends on the environment, the situation, and circumstances. So now what we're looking at is what's going on in the life. The first thing is we know that JonBenét was a very low risk victim. And the chances are that the offender knows her. She may or may not know the offender. And if she does, she may know them from intimate all the way to a passing by, a cursory type of a connection. So once we've made that determination, we want to understand now within the last approximate time frame, what has elevated that risk level for her to become higher in terms of her risk level of becoming a victim of that particular type of a crime. So we're interested particularly in knowing what's going on in her life. Here are some victim activities that we'd be interested in knowing, the key factors in a victimology analysis. We want to know what the victim was doing in the days and hours leading up to the event, that being the crime. What are there any triggering events? What specific actions or circumstances may have set that crime in motion? What's going on in her lifestyle that would be considered a triggering event related to the crime itself? Are there any precipitating stressors? Stressors in the life of the victim that place her in a higher risk set of environment, situation, and circumstances. And then is there potentially, what was the initial contact with that offender and where was it? What was the environment, situation, and circumstances as it relates to JonBenét's activities and associations and her families? Because let's make this very clear. This is not just a crime that's been committed against JonBenét. This has been committed against her whole family. Everybody has been victimized that know her at various levels, and particularly her own family, who we would consider as secondary victims.
Hey, so with that, this is a great segue, John, into educating us and the public about, let's talk about some of the significant events before the crime, and walk the public through what was going on with your family at that time. You know, I think the public understands, you know, the narrative of, you know, you guys are going on a vacation, et cetera, but walk everybody through a day-to-day life. I don't know if he can hear us again. Can he hear it? Can you hear? Let me make sure he can hear. Well, I don't think he can hear us on that side. He's got a speaker problem over there. All right, we'll let him. We're going to hold there just for a second. We're going to let him get his phone working. He's traveling. He's not in his normal house. He's up. I think he's up in Michigan.
Yes.
Oh, you're back.
I've got audio again.
Okay, good. Oh, good, John. Great to have you back. So
Sorry.
we've kind of laid, Greg. No, this is great, man. Greg's kind of laid the foundation for, you know, the victimology here. So what I want the, you know, you've always talked about, you know, the day of, you know, getting ready for the, the trip, the vacation to Michigan, you know, the plane ride, all that stuff. But give us a day-to-day, walk us back through JonBenét's habits, what Patsy and how you guys, what kind of dance classes, all the kind of stuff that Burke was involved in and that JonBenét was involved in, things that the public has, has never heard or considered before that.
Yeah. Well, Patsy had the theory that she wanted her children to try whatever they're interested in to see what they'd be really good at. And some things they were good at, some things they weren't. Burke played soccer. JonBenét took dancing lessons. She took piano lessons. I think she took violin lessons actually for a short time. Piano lessons. She was scheduled to take rock climbing lessons in January of '97. She wanted to try that. And so that was just how we wanted the kids to experiment with what they're good at. And JonBenét, excuse me, got interested in these pageants, beauty pageants. Patsy was in the Miss America pageant in the 70s, and JonBenét was enamored with that. And JonBenét is very much like her mother, very much an outgoing extrovert. And Patsy never really talked about her background that way. She told me once, said, "Hey, I knew I couldn't win, I couldn't sing, but it was just a fun experience, and I got a scholarship from the Miss America associations. So it was a fun deal, but I didn't have a prayer to win. So, and she never talked about it. It was not, but somehow JonBenét became aware of that, and she wanted to try it. And I don't know whose idea it was first, but Patsy entered JonBenét a little bitty contest, and she did, I don't know, half a dozen of maybe over a year or so. One of which was just a week or two before Christmas '96, and so that was one event that was unusual. The other thing that I've always wondered about is our company, which we were a computer products distributor, and in that business, you had to sell a lot of stuff to make a little money because your margins are not very good, and we were not big in our industry, but we had in December realized we were gonna hit $1 billion in sales. And by that time, we'd been bought by Lockheed a year or two before, and so we were proud of that. We were a little surprised, actually. We weren't keeping track, and so our marketing lady said, "Oh, I want to put this in the newspaper, local newspaper." And I thought, I'm not sure that's a good idea for a lot of reasons, but pride got in the way, and thought, okay, that's good, and I wanted our employees to be proud of their company, and so I let them go ahead and contact the local newspaper. And they came and interviewed me and had a picture of me in the paper, and such Access hits $1 billion in sales. So by that time, I was an employee of Lockheed. And so, and of course, people thought, well, he must be a billionaire. Well, that wasn't true at all. I was a salaried employee. And anyway, so came out, and I worried that later, after all this happened, that maybe that was a trigger event. Somebody who was jealous or angry or thought, well, that so and so doesn't deserve that. Who knows? Other than that, there wasn't anything unusual in the weeks leading up to Christmas. We had a party for our friends who had kids the same age. So we had parents and kids come over. I mean, this was maybe 3 or 4 days before Christmas. And we had a Santa Claus look-alike come to the door and I think we had little things for the kids that he gave out. And it was, early in the evening that all that took place. And that was, I think, 3 or 4 days before Christmas at our house. And then Christmas Day, of course, kids get up at the crack of dawn and go downstairs and open presents, and then we made breakfast, and then other kids came over to the house that morning or that day. Actually, we had kids in and out all day, and then that evening, early evening, we went out to some friend's house for dinner with the kids. Good, and came back fairly early. I think 9 p.m., maybe 9:30, because we were going to get up early the next morning and fly out of Denver to meet my older kids in our little family cottage up in Michigan. They were going to fly up from Minneapolis. They lived in Atlanta. So we were going to rendezvous in Minneapolis and then go on up to northern Michigan for a few days. And then after that, we had tickets for Burke, JonBenét, Patsy, and I to go on the Disney Red Boat cruise. First time any of us had been on a cruise. And so that was going to be part of the Christmas
Present.
The experience. And so that was something the kids were looking forward to. And we were too. So that, other than those things, there wasn't anything different.
Tell the audience about her dance classes and that type of situation.
I don't know much about the dance class because Patsy would take her to that.
Okay.
It was in Boulder, and it was a group lesson with multiple kids. And she didn't do it a long time, but maybe 4, 5, 6 months, as I recall. And she, I don't remember ever seeing the results of her lessons. So I'm not sure what they taught her, but she.
That subtlety right there is a very sad commentary, right? I mean, you've waited for years, and that memory. I mean, I know you and I have talked offline many times about the loss of a child.
Yeah,
and the fact that you make a comment like that, that hits me pretty hard because I understand that gap, that void. It makes total sense to me. But I think the world sometimes has perceived you and read you differently because of those little gaps like that. And so I really appreciate your honesty in saying what you just said about I don't know what the results were. I mean, that simplicity aspect, and I'm going to leave that to the docs to kind of analyze, the total things of that. But it really does show, to me anyway, there's a piece of your soul, and I know it, Patsy's soul, and your sweet wife now, I can only imagine that, it's sitting there, and we'll get to that piece of the puzzle. So I think this is a pretty good break in terms of, kind of giving us a little understanding of how we got up to that particular day. Anybody have any questions or want to dovetail into off of what John was thinking or saying, or Greg, Dean, Kurt, Larry?
Just an observation, John. Thanks for sharing those things with us,
and
with the audience. There's a lot of folks that are intently listening to you, and wondering what your life was like, what your life with Patsy and your children was like at the time. And it's very, very personal. Were you about to say something?
Well, our life was pretty good. Patsy and I had been married, 12 years, I think, when approximately 12 years when Beth was killed. My daughter, Beth, who had just graduated from college and was visiting her boyfriend's parents in Chicago, and they were killed the middle of the day in Chicago on a freeway. And that really devastated our whole family. Patsy loved Beth dearly, was a wonderful stepmother, and it really was hard. And I don't think there's anything harder for a human than to lose a child. And it took me, you don't get over it, you become different. One mother who had lost her child described it to me as a hole in her heart. She says, I have a hole in my heart that won't heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that's a pretty good description. So we were leading up to the time that we lost JonBenét, we were recovering from that horrible loss of Beth and trying to get more focused on going forward in the future. And so that element was kind of in our family. And Beth, I have a picture of Beth holding JonBenét when JonBenét was a little baby. And but Beth lived in Atlanta, and JonBenét lived in Boulder, and they didn't know each other real well. But JonBenét was obviously aware that we'd lost Beth, and that had to impact her in ways that we maybe didn't understand.
Sure.
But we had a good family, and I don't know, things were going well for us, and we didn't, we were frankly kind of naive in terms of worrying about who was around us, what was going on. We lived in Atlanta for years and years, and you live in Atlanta, you worry about your burglar alarm, and do you have lights that you can flip on when you hear a noise, and it's just a big city, and there's good people there and bad people, and so we moved to Boulder. We thought we were in some Ozzie and Harriet La La Land, flowers coming up everywhere, and no bad people here. We don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, and that was just frankly very naive.
Sure.
And I regret that. And I've told people there are bad people, there are good people everywhere, and there's bad people everywhere. And just don't be stupid. Your home should be your sanctuary and your castle, and make sure it's secure, and particularly at night when you're asleep. I never worried about people coming in and stealing the silverware or something, but we tried to keep the doors locked, but we weren't religious about it. I never, ever worried about somebody coming in and murdering one of my children. That just was not possible. And it never crossed my mind that was a risk.
Sure.
And I lock the doors now all the time. Even during the day, I had a friend in Boulder who I'd go over to his house for lunch, and he'd lock the door. That's kind of weird. You're in the house. Why would you lock the door? But I do that now, and that's
Sure.
just practical and smart.
Yeah.
But regretfully, we were not. We just thought we lived in a very safe little town, and it turns out it was not at all. There's a lot of weird people around us, as it turned out.
Mhm.
And
And so your biggest concern for risk, if you will, had to do with probably automobile accidents or other types of accidents.
Yeah,
based upon your
exactly.
experience with your daughter, right?
yeah, that's what you're worried about.
So I would assume that you would be very vigilant about ensuring that everybody, when in the vehicle, they're strapping on their seatbelts, for example.
Yep.
Right.
After we lost Beth, and she was my oldest daughter, my next daughter in line, Melinda, I got her this diesel monster car.
Mhm.
Wouldn't go very fast, but man, it was like a tank. And that was because of Beth's accident. I didn't want her to be at risk in a car.
Yeah.
That was a very real
Dean
worry.
still has one of those cars, John.
All right. Well, you could stomp on the gas and it would kind of creep up in speed, but it wasn't going to go very fast, very quickly. But
I would
yeah,
guess you were very vigilant with Patsy and JonBenét also.
Oh, yeah.
As it related to the motor vehicles and transportation.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I mean,
that was the big.
Yep. Go ahead.
That's the big thing you worry about as a parent, particularly
You
when
bet.
kids get to be driving age.
You bet.
And but never did I worry about somebody coming into our house when we were there.
That's the last thing on all of our minds, really.
So,
you know.
That's actually a good place to pivot here for a moment to talk about some of the methodology we're going to approach the house here. And so Dean put this particular case or this particular slide together here. And one of the things that you see are these little orange lines here. So Dean, can you explain this slide and how we're going to approach this in relationship to a discussion about the crime scene, but just an initial overview? Go ahead.
Sure. So this is the basement level of John and Patsy's home. And so if we look at this, we tried to focus specifically on the crime scene itself. And one of the things that I think we talked about in the early days when we first started meeting with John was, rather than getting distracted by all of the information that was out there, let's go back to kind of what we do know and the evidence on hand. So if you look at this particular layout of their basement floor, this particular room's, it was called the wine cellar. It sounds more like, I know they didn't particularly use it for that, but it was just pretty much a dark room with no windows or anything. And it had a doorway so you came downstairs and you could go directly into it, past the boiler and into this wine cellar area. And this is the location that JonBenét Ramsey's body was found, was actually in this room. And so what we said is that let's take and create a box around what we know. We know that somebody definitely probably is coming down the stairs, because we know that JonBenét that night originated in her room on the second floor. And there's discussion about a window that was broken and possibly came in there. We can get to that later. So we've got a dotted line around that because a lot of people have speculated that this was the actual entry way into that floor. But what we do know for sure is that this is where John Ramsey found JonBenét's body, brought her back up and went up these stairs to the second floor. So the orange solid lines are what we know for a fact. Possible that the perpetrator was in this area here and in through that, and we'll get into that at a later time. But we tried to create a box within this home, rather than having the offender moving all throughout this house for all these various reasons. We said, let's talk about the evidence that we have, what we know. We know her body was in that particular room, and we know that she had to be brought in there from the bedroom. So let's put everything down as tight a box as we can on each floor. If there's evidence, then let's go out. So we come up to the next floor, stairs coming up from the basement would take you through the kitchen, and then this spiral staircase that leads up to the second floor where JonBenét was. Back here, and then this is where that comes out, and then this is JonBenét's room. So if we put a perpetrator, how they got into the house, and we can get into that, but we put them in the house, we really have created within this home a box on each floor as to where this person, we're not saying they can't be outside of it, but we're saying we know for sure that they function within this box. We can look at reasons to get them outside of the box, but everything we know about the crime, starting with her abduction, her death, and all of that, all it really requires is those three. This is the top floor. This is actually what functioned as John and Patsy's master suite for their whole, so the primary bedroom for the parents. Two sets of stairs, one coming here from the downstairs up, and then this set of stairs drops down to the second floor right by JonBenét's room. So you have basically this box on the second floor, the box on the first floor, and the box on the basement as to where we want to start our investigation. So we're talking right now about starting. We're getting this case. We're beginning our work through it. So we know that she was in her room when mom and dad put her to bed that night. We know that she's found down on the basement floor in this cellar. And so as we move through these boxes, we see how this person had to move through that particular area within the home. Doesn't mean we can't go outside of it. Doesn't mean we won't get outside of it as we start looking at more and more evidence. But for this moment, the starting point is to stay within this box. And I'll just throw this out there. One of the things I think that we've been looking at is a lot of talk has been about this broken window, and somebody came in through this open window, and that may be their entrance point. One of the other things we talk about with evidence, don't complicate it any more than we have to. As we've talked with John, there's a lot of questions about whether or not that window had been broken previously. There's a lot of things surrounding that. We're not saying they couldn't come through that window. But what is interesting is that in the files, we do know that this back door on the first floor was found ajar, was open. And so we found 2 or 3 locations where this is referred to as an open door to the outside. So what it begs the question is, why we have to start there and say this is definitely a place where they could have exited. It's also a place, if it's open and was left open for whatever reason, or a perpetrator maybe was in a period of time before and came in and left it open, we can literally, without ever looking at that bedroom or that extra spare room in the basement, we can at least start with the possibility that somebody came in through that door, went up and got JonBenét, brought her down to the cellar, then went right back out and went out that door. And that's the simplest and quickest and keeps them kind of confined within that box. Now, as we unfold through this investigation, there are other evidence we'll start talking about, and then that begins to look at, okay, do we go outside of the box or do we stay within that box? So we're kind of at the very early stages here of talking about where in the home. So we don't want to get a picture of people wandering through this whole house and all these different places, because I think when we start getting into the behavior of this individual, there's some specific things going on that I know that Greg and Dr. Simon are going to address. So hopefully that covers it.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And when we first started looking at this as a group and an organization, to Dean's point, which he tied it up really very succinctly, is we started looking at what, these boxes as almost compartments of behavior, where we're not looking at the total picture just yet. It's like sitting in a crime scene and then examining this light over here, this picture up here, et cetera, and the list goes on. Well, there was a behavior that was selected to buy that light. There was a behavior to read these types of books, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've done over the last year by analyzing and just having open discussions like this is we wanted to understand what those potential compartments could be and how do they fit in a psychological aspect in relationship to one particular item. And whenever you're dealing with a death of a child, the item of evidence that is utilized to accomplish that task becomes a tool in the behavioral pattern of the suspect. And so the first question we wanted to ask ourselves, which we have asked collectively as a group, is would a mother, number one, utilize a weapon such as this on her child? That was the first question we needed to address. And so we had Dr. Simon and Greg weigh in. And so Larry, folks are waiting to start hearing, from the guy in the middle. They say, we want to hear from the guy in the middle. I'm watching it. And I'm like, oh, you will, trust me. And so thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, any weapon used, there's some complex psychological fantasies. And so, this type of predatory behavior often results from traumatic experience that alter cognitive processing. So this type of offender would have deeply ingrained, internalized violent fantasies and then rehearse them cognitively. So essentially the psyche would merge, with these aggressive tendencies that you would see this pattern. It would basically be it would entail fantasy scripts on a psychological form of hatred onto the victim, designed to soothe painful mental states or to compensate for deep-rooted inadequacies. So the victim, with the use of certain weaponry, would be stripped of humanity from an empathic sense. So they're only viewed as objects for the offender to master, manipulate, or destroy. So the question which you asked, what was the question that you asked, Chris?
Yeah, the psychological aspect of what's going on in the offender's mind.
Yes. So in this sense, the individual would be used or would be thought of as an object for the offender to master, manipulate, or destroy. So the result of the crime is a defense of this individual's feelings of powerlessness or inadequacy, and maybe their perceived inability to maintain emotional bonds, prompting them to kill, to even possess the victim, maybe to prevent some sort of abandonment or rejection. The offender also may attempt to reverse, because we see a lot of these offenders that they have, there's trauma while simultaneously indulging in their fantasy, whatever that is. So it creates a sense of euphoria with their perception of the ideal or perceived perfect victim.
So with evidence of an essay to this to this child. Where does that take us in terms of what type of offender, what category, where does that move us on the scale? Does it take us closer to a 9-year-old boy? Does it move us away from a 9-year-old child? What's your opinion?
No, it moves away from a 9-year-old boy because you would have seen. It's very difficult. Now, it's very atypical. It would be atypical for any 9-year-old to have this level of violence. But if that was the case, you would have had some rehearsal, some abusive. They could have taken it out on other organisms, and even with a limbic system. So you'll see that in their history. So for someone to just to do this without being recognized or seen, their behavior would almost clue into something like this. So the short answer would be no. Very atypical. I mean, first of all, it's atypical to begin with. So, but you would certainly see. And what I mean by that is that I've seen young children, they've done some horrific things, but you would see sort of that rehearsal before it would get to this point. It just doesn't happen blindly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Explain to the audience what, in your opinion, based on interviewing thousands of these guys. I mean, you're in the prisons even today. We can't talk about it, but you are working with these guys as we speak. What would be the typical? How do they feel about the buildup to the child?
Well, they certainly do have, and in my experience, these intrusive, repetitive fantasies that involuntarily create the circumstances of their trauma, whatever that is. And, in psychoanalysis, they actually call it repetition compulsion. But it's an unconscious attempt sort of by the brain to process the trauma and rewrite the narrative. So it allows that individual to gain some sort of sense of control and empowerment that they originally lacked. So basically, they're converting the trauma into triumph, where the fantasy is the mechanism for revenge. So the perpetrator is faced with overwhelming, chaotic inner world of fantasy. They rely on this sort of primitive psychological defense, and we most commonly refer to it as disassociation. So the offender is able to disconnect from reality and compartmentalizes these aggressive impulses from their conscious everyday persona. So this allows them to commit these heinous acts without immediate interference of conscious guilt, or basically returning to what we may see, as from someone from the outside being normal, and that's what I say. So I sit and I interview some of these individuals, and you couldn't possibly imagine what they've done, but yet they sit there, and you would never know that they did it. They're able to compartmentalize that. So, but I certainly go back. I go back to of course, many people have. We know that survived trauma is just what happens is with these individuals. Their fantasies, go to the point where it's off the deep end, and thank God, thank goodness for us, it's mercifully rare.
Okay.
Can I ask a question here, Chris?
Sure, please, Kurt.
Doctor, have you ever been involved in a case where a 9-year-old had the level of sophistication to use slip knots?
No.
Rot?
No, absolutely not. And that's why, no.
Well, and another thing to keep in mind is that at the time, the Boulder Police Department had excluded Burke as a suspect in the DNA that was found on JonBenét's body.
This isn't the right one.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation for sure, Kurt. And these are the other. Trust me, there's going to be a lot of episodes here because we've been sitting on this thing for a year, even with Larry. And so, yeah, we're going to address We're going to address the note. We're going to address other suspects. But yes, to your point, they did hold that young man, in the pocket for, I guess that's what we'll call it, unfairly. And there are still people, even to this day, still of the opinion that he's the guy. Okay. But that said, we're going to approach that openly through this conversation. And we're going to, just present the evidence as it is. So one of the things I want to go right back to for a second is Greg, weigh in off of what Larry's talking about here in relationship to the findings that we're kind of discovering about these compartmentalized pieces of the house and how it leads us down into the wine cellar.
You bet. So what we're talking about here is what we like to refer to as behavioral evidence. There are 4 basic types of evidence that law enforcement looks at and acquires in order to successfully convict somebody of a crime. Forensic evidence, eyewitness evidence, confessions, and circumstantial evidence. And typically, it's going to take at least 2 of those forms of evidence to convict any one person of a crime. And often what is overlooked, particularly as it relates to trying to understand the offender and focusing on, by process of elimination, who's the most probable type of an offender, most probable type of a personality, of all of those possibilities. And so with the behavioral evidence, and Doc, correct me if you suggest otherwise and believe otherwise, but from an investigative perspective, behavior simplified is a reflection of thoughts, feelings, and emotions of the offender. And generally speaking, anytime people go out and conduct themselves in various ways, it's a manifestation of what's happening in their mind, their thoughts, feelings, and emotions that they're experiencing, and their ability to deal with those. And as we look at this particular case, as you so articulately laid out, Doc, about the fantasy, it's fantasy driven. And this isn't a fantasy that was developed overnight. It's not a fantasy that just happened that evening. This is something that's been developed over time, right? Mm-hmm. And these specific types of behaviors that we're talking about are associated with an individual who has, by process of fantasy, identified those things that are of interest to them, something that has that stimulates them, that gives them a sense of power and domination and control that they seem to have lost at various levels in their lifetime. And now they're exerting these things, and by association and the successful commission of these acts, they sense and have this sense of power and control that they most likely don't experience very well in their own life, generally speaking, right?
Yes.
And so as we look at the layout of the house and what it took for an individual to commit these acts, what type of a person, just physically, let's just talk about the physical capability. And going back to the house, the individual obviously had to be familiar with the outlay of the house, had to know where JonBenét's room was. This isn't a crime that an individual is a stranger to, both in mind and possible perpetration. That there may have been before and may have been since certain crimes that have been committed that may have common characteristics. We know that JonBenét had to be carried from her bedroom. The individual had to know where her bedroom was, had to be carried from her bedroom at the second floor down to the basement or third floor into the wine cellar. Now, what does that suggest to us? Familiarity with the home and where every room is and what those rooms are. He takes her to, if we look at that outline of that where the wine cellar is, it's the furthest location away from not only her room, but also her parents' room. Because now the individual takes her to a location where he must feel a sense of confidence, a sense of, and a lack of concern for being interrupted. He's aware of the condition of the remainder of the family, what they're doing. They're all sleeping. He knows that they're sleeping. He knows where they're sleeping. And he moves JonBenét now from her bedroom. He has to control her in order to do that. Well, a 9-year-old boy is not going to be capable of doing something like that. And there are other activities that we'll talk about in the process that may have helped facilitate her state of consciousness to get her down there without waking and resisting or crying for help. Would a 9-year-old boy be capable of that level of organization and capability? You know, we can always say, well, it's possible. It's possible there's a man on the moon, but it's not very probable. What's probable is an individual who has taken the time to plan this thing out over a period of time, knowing where all the rooms are in that house over a period of time, knowing where her room is, what they're going to do once they get into the home, where they're going to take her, what room they're going to take her to. And that's before we even get into some of these concepts of the sustained aggressiveness and aggression that the individual participates in, as it relates to the SA behavior. And in my opinion, Doc, I'd like your opinion on this, is the element of sadistic SA behavior.
Mm-hmm. Very much, yeah, very much so. And that usually takes much time to develop, and the likelihood of this occurring more than once is high.
From a suspectology?
This wouldn't likely have been the first time.
So obviously then critically thinking here as a group, is a 9-year-old then in play in anybody's opinion here, excluding John, of course, because we love, his opinion, but it wouldn't be appropriate. But anybody have an opinion based on your training and experience that a 9-year-old's in play here?
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely no.
With this weapon of choice?
No.
Okay. which leads us then to the second question I want to help take a look at is do you when we look at this, and as we started to look at this, we noticed a couple of things in this box here. In this particular box, everything is in this box that was ultimately discovered, and the note, the flashlight, everything is in this particular box, and a possible point of entry. One of the things we were talking about, and I want your opinion, Larry, set the stage for the fantasy process probably going on. If this is the intruder theory, where somebody is coming into this environment, what's going on internally for them? Do you believe? Again, remind the audience one more time.
I think that this individual was set on. He would have targeted this individual, and going back, this going back to, if this individual survived some complex psychological past, he would have he would recreate some of these unconscious attempts to want to get in touch with his inadequacies, and the victim would have served this purpose, and he this is somebody that likely would have made this selection well ahead of time.
And as you've pointed out, Greg, it's probably, and both Dr. Simon, you're both of the opinion that this is probably not their first rodeo.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which now leads us into, one of the obvious, positions. If we take the sophistication, or not the sophistication, but the fact that the suspect has gotten away with this, if that is our, one of the avenues we're going to go down here, do you believe there would be post-incident events that the authorities should be looking at?
Very much so, from my perspective. Yeah. Past behavior is predictive of future behavior. It's kind of a simple, common quip that we like to use, and particularly for individuals who are achieving levels of gratification that they can't achieve it in any other way. So they have to repeat it, and they want to improve it. So it matches that fantasy that they've been developing over time.
And piggybacking off what Greg said too, is that you would have there would be a trail. There would be something that individual was looking at, that it could be subtle, it could be hidden, it could be in plain sight, but you would see, because everything with these individuals is visual, and you would see something that you would there'd be something there. It basically, this wouldn't go. I mean, when they find the individual that did it, there will be a trail. There'll be something there, because it's very difficult to hide this. So what they'll do is they'll submerge themselves in other types of things, fantasies, if you will, and that may be sufficient for a certain amount of time, but that only lasts for so long. So to get to that level of SA, there would have to be a trail to that. As Greg and you just don't wake up and get to this. This is a long-standing history from very early childhood, and then getting to this point here would be the end result of things that have happened in that individual's life, which are unique to each individual.
And Doc, do you think that even the creation of those knots, or the way in which that rope was tied around that piece of garrote or paintbrush, I believe it was,
Yes.
do you believe that is part and parcel to this fantasy? Yeah.
Yeah, I as a matter of fact, do, because certainly it's an extension of the perpetrator's desire to dehumanize, to instill fear, and that's part of it, to instill that fear. And I think this was purposeful.
Yeah, and for the audience, just as a reminder, we're just talking about the weapon that was selected for this evening. And we're going to go into the suspects and all this other stuff later on. But right now, we're talking about we're processing this idea of a 9-year-old utilizing this type of weapon, and or somebody else, a mother, utilizing this type of weapon. Dr. Simon, do you see a mother utilizing this type of weapon on her child?
No.
Do you see a father utilizing this type of weapon on their child in this type of circumstance?
No.
Do you see a post-incident addition? You would be of the opinion that later on we would also try that the suspect would utilize this as a victory, and that the fantasy would continue to grow, or would it diminish?
Oh, I believe it would continue to grow. Once you go down that road, in my experience, talking with, and again, I mean, like I said, it's mercifully rare, but it's very difficult to backtrack. They can substitute the behavior maybe for something else that may help them survive, like somebody that was on a deserted island and would have crackers. But at the end of the day, once they get to that point, I'm afraid it's very challenging for them. Could it happen? Could they stop? But they're likely going to be doing other things it's going to be manifested in some way. And Greg, you agree with that? Or?
Oh, absolutely. This is a fantasy that it's not one of these, what sometimes we refer to as a one and done. It's taken a while to get here, and it hasn't been perfected yet. There are elements of this crime that are unsuccessful, and in my estimation, most likely didn't match the fantasy that they've constructed.
And yeah, just speaking of that too, is that matching the fantasy, there's a very strong likelihood that this individual, I don't know if this individual, but utilizing, the weapon, there could have been some instances to where this was rehearsed in other ways, unsuccessfully. So to get to this point, again, we sometimes may refer to it as nuisance crimes that could have occurred.
Sure.
So that would have been a likelihood. That's
Talk about, how about you guys talk for a minute about the possibility that this individual had been in the home before, and fantasy fantasizing, understanding the inside of this home, knowing things, doesn't need to move around the night of the incident. Is that a possibility that, he had been in the home before and that was part of the fantasy?
Oh, sure. I think we would be in agreement that this individual's been in the home a number of times.
Yeah.
And this individual is no stranger, most likely no stranger to the family. Maybe a wolf in sheep's clothing, so to speak, and may not stand out to the family as a likely contender until they find out more about who the person is. And, don't you agree too, Doc, that this level of aggression, sustained aggression throughout the commission of the crime speaks of a more mature personality, an adult personality?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I mean, some of the folks, again, on that I've spoken to on death row, for example, to get to that level, again, takes time. So if you're talking to, with usually when they're younger, a younger child, you're going to see some terrible things done to but to get to the level of where this is, there's, as you would say, Greg, that there's a certain level of maturity, older age to get to this. There almost certainly.
And experience, right?
Experience.
Yeah.
And that's where the rehearsal comes in. That's where these things, and they could, like I said, some of these nuisance crimes, again, that we, I believe it was, and don't hold me to this, but I believe one of these serial killers had used a stick and it hit someone and ran away. And how do you report that? You just say somebody struck me with a stick and ran away, to see what the reaction would be. So over time, so it's trial and error, essentially, until they get it right.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say then at this point, just by starting with just the weapon in of itself, that this individual, and keep me on the right track, that this individual had an experience level fantasy base up to including maybe even practicing or something to that effect, even before JonBenét or any of somewhere else was even involved in anything, right? And we just don't know about that right now. There's no evidence that gives us that, but it wouldn't surprise anybody on the panel to say, hey, they should look for cases that would be similar to this kind of selected type of weapon, and or at least building up to that. Indications of binding and that type of stuff. Would that be accurate?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Dean?
Yeah.
Kurt?
Definitely.
Any thought
I
process?
agree.
Okay, and so now we get to, okay, well, what if he's operating, hypothetically, with all of this going on upstairs, and his drive here is, okay, I'm in the house. Greg, you've even opined that it would never surprise you that the guy or persons have even been in this house prior to the incident, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I believe that the person's been in the house before,
Okay.
and may have spent time in the house while the family is sleeping.
Okay.
And watching.
And when you said that struck a chord with our group. And so we kind of thought, okay, well, let's start, like Dean mentioned, let's start down in the basement. Let's compartmentalize there. and try to move ourselves up into the behavior possibilities of the suspect moving through that home. And the idea of point of entry came to a conversation here. And we have multiple possibilities of how a suspect could have gotten into the home. But one of the things that has always been, kind of in the narrative and with Lou, Kurt, has been this basement window. And we're going to go into that on the next episode. But I'm just talking about, okay, what are the possibilities right now, right? Mm-hmm. So right now we've got the possibility of, the broken window theory. And then we've got the possibility of the, I guess we'll call it the butler's pantry. John, would that be the door there at the butler's pantry? Yeah, I think John is listening. And then
he's still having trouble with his sound, but he said yes.
Okay, not a problem. I get it, and we'll get it all dialed in, everybody, for the next episode. But then again, we have this balcony up on JonBenét's floor, up on the 3rd floor, and even though that's never really been discussed, I think it's something to keep into consideration, and we'll talk about that in the next upcoming episodes and stuff, and some of the things that we've discovered. But I think for the sake of tonight, let's talk about this butler's point of entry. We don't have the wizard here tonight, but he'll be here on other episodes, and you'll come to know the wizard. He won't even show his face. We've sworn him to secrecy that he'll be behind the scenes here. But we've discovered some reports of that this butler's door was actually left open that morning and that night. And it's in the official documents. And so we started thinking, okay, let's take the hypothesis of the window and let's compartmentalize this door right here on the lower floor as a potential access point, because you have a neighbor who says, hey, I came over and the door was open 5 inches. It was left propped open 5 inches, and that neighbor reported it to the police. And then you have other first responders who got there. Remember, this was the day before body cameras. And the other first responder said, yes, I saw that door was open. Okay. So we want to know and question this idea of, could this have been the easiest way in as that piece? And then we have the balcony upstairs. And we're going to go into that on the next one, but you're going to see a very interesting correlation to something else that occurred in the neighborhood. Okay. And that will tie into our continual conversation about, filter number 2 and filter number 3. But so let's just talk, for a moment here about this door. Dean, start us off on what some of your observations were about this particular door. You kind of went over it a little bit earlier, but bring the audience into what your thought process is.
So I think what we were kind of struck by was, I have this analogy that I use with people a lot, and that is, if you've got a low spot in your garage and you take a big bucket of water and you pour it on that floor, the water will automatically run to that area. Now, if you put dams up or blockage and stuff, you can make it go different places in the garage. But when you just throw it out there and go, where does it flow to? And I think what struck us initially was the possibility of there being a unlocked door in this home that all of a sudden doesn't make coming in through the window a requirement to get this crime accomplished. We're not saying that they didn't come that way, but let's assume for just a moment that the doors is unlocked. And I know when we talked with John, one of the things he talked about when we kept kind of coming back to this issue was he said, to be honest with you, he said, it's very, very possible that it could have been unlocked. He said it wasn't something, and I think he was alluding to that earlier when he was talking about just how they functioned at that time as far as, their concern for everything being locked down. So when we looked at that, because if you look at the window scenario requires a lot of extra movement, right? You've got to lift up a grate, you've got to come down through there, you've got to get down into that storage area, and then move yourself through. Still works. Not saying it didn't happen that way, but with this door open, it opens two possibilities. One, did the person, let's say they came in through the window, did they leave that way? In other words, did they come back upstairs, go out the butler, and that's the way they left, and that's why it's open? Possible. But if they left that way, and back to the idea that they've been in that home multiple times, or at least more than once this event, then they're more familiar with this house and knowing that. So if I know I'm trying to get into this house and there is an open door, or I can get a door open without having to crawl down through a window well and come through a broken window, that. And even the discussion we had with John about the broken window, he said, I can't even say for sure that maybe it wasn't broken before. So it really puts kind of an interesting twist on that. And back to what I was saying earlier, let's not complicate it more than we have to. We're not saying that we can't go back to the window. We're not saying that we can't go somewhere else. But if we're going to stay in the box and we're going to stay there and give this person the most mobility and keep everything without forcing them to go to another area. Now, if the evidence takes us there, great, let's go there. But without any evidence to push us any other direction, an open door in that location really begins to make quite an interesting area to look at and at least visit.
So from a behavioral aspect, is everybody, if we're on the first floor here and we look at this door here on the far right that says, that where the line is broken, that's the door we're referring to. And what's interesting here is it's within the box of, if you go to the right, you go right upstairs, and that takes you immediately to the second floor, and it comes out right at JonBenét's bedroom. Okay. So then if we think, okay, well, if that is a possibility, then where does it go on the opposite side of this box towards the basement? And lo and behold, it goes exactly within the secondary box, or we'll call it the third box now, directly into the basement, and then directly into the wine cellar room. So the other thing that was of interesting note here to note is the ransom note is found at the bottom of the first set of stairs to the right. Okay. And then the flashlight is over here in the kitchen. All of this is in a container within inside of the house. So the suspect doesn't have to really do much when we're thinking outside of the box here. So John, if you can hear us, I don't know if you can hear us or not. Can you hear us? Okay. Can you hear us, John?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So did we get anything wrong or do you want to add something differently to what we've just discussed up to this point on this box concept?
No, I think it's very logical, and I'd always wondered why the ransom note was put on the spiral staircase, and that explains it quite logically. It was in his operations area. Yes, there was a front staircase, but that would have taken him all the way through the house to get to it.
Kurt, any comments, any observations?
Well, I maybe just wanted John to confirm this, but I think if that butler's door is a point of egress, that's a really dark area and very well concealed at night. Isn't that correct, John?
Yes. Yeah. It,
Yes, so I
you know,
that
that door,
makes good sense.
I don't recall I ever used that door anyway, myself. You know, we had kids in and out of the house all day, Christmas Day. Who knows? They could have gone out that door and left it unlocked. I don't know, but it was I didn't know it was found open that morning until the police told me about it.
Yeah, so for me, it makes perfect sense that that's where the perpetrator wants to leave. He's just committed a horrific crime and skulks off in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah, it fits too the thought that the perpetrator is trying to get out as soon as possible after they're completed, after they're finished. They want to be concealed. They're trying to hide their identity, escape, and successfully commit this crime. It's all part of the MO. But for me, it keeps everything effective, efficient, and flexible for the perp who's familiar with that whole box area that we're talking about at each level of the home. And it reduces their risk level of getting caught, apprehended, identified, etc., to successfully come into the house and to leave the house, at least leave the house. Most offenders are looking for the easiest, least resistant way in which to commit a crime, particularly if they're organized. They want to. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, Greg, go finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Just that they're trying to be as efficient and effective as possible, so they protect their identity, facilitate their escape, and successfully commit their crime. To move in, take care of it, move out without being seen and caught.
Yeah, I think it's just the movies that try to make it as complicated and run us through 25 mazes to get it done. Typically, people are looking for the quickest way to what they're doing.
Which is a great segue into a conversation about staging. Greg, Dr. Simon, in all your years, all your experience, Greg, you ran the FBI's behavior analysis unit as unit chief. Dr. Simon, if you want to read Larry's bio, it's down on the link below. Trust me, you're going to be very happy. In any way, shape, or form, hypothetically, one of the theories has always been Burke whacks his sister with a baseball bat, and then the parents come behind and they stage this elaborate cover-up using a garrote and writing ransom notes and leaving them at the foot of the, going up to the second floor, and then they call the police. Question. Out of all of that concept, why choose a garrote?
They wouldn't.
I was going to say they wouldn't exactly. Yeah, I don't think they would. No.
And I agree. Okay, but I'm playing devil's advocate for the audience so that everybody understands. Trust me, we've gone over this with the Ramseys for almost a year now, and we have looked at this thing from every angle possible with a lot of experts and a lot of people that have challenged it many times, and we all keep coming back to this conversation tonight. Okay, let's just be clear. We read a letter early on that the DNA did not match, and this is where I'm going with this last comment here. The DNA did not match Patsy. Now we're talking DNA now. Okay. The DNA did not match this gentleman right here, Mr. John Ramsey. And the DNA did not match JonBenét's her brother, older brother, 9-year-old Burke at the time. Okay. They're not the donors of the DNA. They've been cleared by DNA. In today's standards, everybody's waiting in the Nancy Guthrie case for the DNA to come back. Okay. The DNA has come back. What Mr. Ramsey is trying to do is get the additional DNA tested to find the perpetrator again. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this is we're not here to change your mind. We're not here to say, hey, we're right or wrong. We're here to present the evidence as it exists in 2026.
Yep.
For 30 years, okay, and for at least 10 years, the DA focused on this gentleman right above us. And then the DNA came back and it said, oops, our bad. Here's a letter of apology. Okay. A news station came out and did a whole thing about his son. Oops, the DNA came back and said, no. And there was a lawsuit that was settled out of court as a result of that. But that branding has never left a 9-year-old little boy. That young man is now a man today, and he is still under scrutiny. Yet his DNA has cleared him. And so my next point here is going to be, will it surprise anyone in this panel if there is additional DNA on this murder weapon that will match the suspect DNA they've already has?
Nope.
No, I would be surprised if there was not any DNA.
Yep.
Yeah, the sophistication now is so much better than it was in 1996. It would be shocking if there wasn't more DNA.
Yeah. And what? Go ahead, Kurt.
If I can just add to that too. The Boulder Police Department always thought that on the night of the crime, there were 4 people in the house: John, Patsy, Burke, and JonBenét. So when the CBI issued their DNA report on January 15th, it excluded John, Patsy, and Burke, but it also indicated that there was an unknown male presence in 3 different areas on JonBenét's body. That should have been a monster clue that there was another person in the house, and it was an evil presence. It was not John, Patsy, or Burke.
And that,
Well, and then 3 areas, and then if you add, if they find it on the garage, now it's 4.
Yes.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yes.
and so that's the purpose of what we have separated ourselves mentally from this idea of I think we could reasonably say we've taken a 9-year-old off of the plate. Would you agree as a Cold Case Foundation?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so for us, we're not going to spend a lot of time entertaining, Burke did it, because that's not going to how it's going to play out ultimately. Okay. So episode 2 and moving 3, 4, and 5 through this thing, okay, he's probably not going to be a conversation for us, because we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. They've been there for 30 years. We're not going there, and we're called the Cold Case Foundation for a reason, okay, to help solve these types of problems, okay? That said, okay, let's talk about what the perpetrator, what items were not found in the home. The white cord used for the garage, still unaccounted for. The duct tape found on JonBenét's mouth, that when John found her, and we're going to go into that in the next episode, not tonight. There was a high-tech shoe print that they believed was recovered. That shoe has not been found. My personal opinion, it could be a cop boot, because that's what cops wore back in that time, high-tech boots. That was like, that's the one to get. The third piece of the paintbrush handle, a potential stun gun that Lou had discussed and others, okay? That is still unaccounted for. And then the missing pages from Patsy's notepad, okay? These are items not found at the crime scene. So there's a presupposition that either A, the suspect took them, or they were thrown away post-incident, or they're still in the possession of the perpetrator, even to this day. And I want to talk about that white cord, why that would be so significant, Dr. Lawrence and Greg.
Well, the white cord is that, as I understand it, is consistent with the type of bondage material that was utilized for her wrists. And if that's accurate, then
it is, I think.
Okay. So, since it's accurate, what would an individual like this sense and feel about that piece of material as it relates to the intricate connection to the crime? Typically, when we deal with crimes like this, it's not uncommon, in fact, it's common, that pieces of literature, types, bondage material, etc., are often kept by the offender as, you may call it, a souvenir or trophies, for them, to allow them to re-engage mentally and fantasize about the experience, and trying to recreate the experience mentally and improve the experience mentally. What's your thoughts, Doc?
I mean, I think that's what I was thinking too. And then perhaps to maybe possibly even be utilized again.
And wouldn't that hold true?
Good thought. Yeah.
Wouldn't that also hold true for the other portion of the paintbrush that possibly is missing?
Mm-hmm.
If they took it with them?
Sure.
Because there's that connectivity back to.
That's a great point, Dean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any and all of the material that, if you can link it to the utility and the application to the criminal behavior, any of that material, it's very common that they would take it with them to relive the crime.
Lou always believed that the perpetrator brought the cord with him because there is one particular segment of the cord that's melted, and then it appears as though the rest of them were almost cut to length as needed during commission of the crime.
Mm.
And then you think, and then in that case, you would think in your mind, at least I would say, is all behavior is purposeful.
Yeah,
Why would you want to give that up
absolutely.
if you spent time and it worked?
So
And
also, I love it. Also, items that did not belong to the family found in the home. Unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing and under her fingernails. A beaver hair, animal hairs, additional animal hairs, and a high-tech shoe print. Okay. And then the next one here is items possibly left behind by the perpetrator. A climbing rope in the spare bedroom, a maglite flashlight found in the kitchen, and a baseball bat in the yard near the butler's door, the same door that we've been discussing, which contained fibers consistent with the basement carpet. So there is a baseball bat found outside of the door we were discussing as a possible point of entry. And on that baseball bat, they discover carpet fibers from the wine cellar where the body is discovered.
Well, it's reasonable to suggest that there may be some transference of evidence from those locations where the perpetrator may have utilized those during the commission of the crime.
So we're getting into now the next chapter of this thing, which we're going to approach soon. Any thoughts from any of the panel before we call this one episode 1 completed?
Just one thought from my perspective.
The fibers that were
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Greg. Well, for some reason, my transmission is really delayed, so I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
That's all right.
The fibers that were found on the baseball bat, were they carpet fibers or?
They were which contained fibers consistent with the basement carpet. Was there a piece of carpet somewhere? Was there a piece of carpet somewhere in the basement?
I don't recall. Well, I don't remember that there was, but it's been too long. That's why I was curious.
Yep. No problem. We're going to go through all the photographs, and we're going to tie some of these loose ends up.
That'd be helpful.
The second piece of this, John, any closing thoughts from your perspective this evening? Things we didn't discuss that you feel are important to discuss? We've had almost 6,000 people here through the whole program.
Wow, that's wonderful. No, I think it's been very thorough, and I sincerely appreciate it. It's helpful to me too to understand better.
Greg, final word.
I hope for your viewers that we have been able to articulate the purpose behind the Cold Case Foundation and the strengths of the foundation by applying the Mayo Clinic approach, wherein we extract the best of the best in our business and come up with better and improved answers, or at least considerations and observations. That's why there's not any one person in the organization who has a light shined upon them individually. It's as a group, and it's always been much more effective for us to function that way.
And John's going to be John Douglas is going to be at CrimeCon.
Yes, he is. So you ought to try to reach out and grab him.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
We'll invite him. We'll invite him to come on board here, one of these episodes.
So, anyway, folks, thank you so much for being with us. And next time we're going to work on a little of the technical things, but that's okay. We had to call Elon Musk in the middle of all of this show to get him on board. Thank you guys, each and every one of you, and we'll see you at the next meeting, and we'll see you guys, our audience, on the next program. So aloha, everybody. Take care of each other, and pray for the right results.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you in a little bit.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hard working every day. I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts. Wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah. Make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.